If you think the UK border crisis is just about weak policy or political incompetence, you're missing the bigger picture. It's not an accident, it's an industry. For the next few minutes, forget the political noise. We're going to follow the money, the contracts, and the 75-year-old legal trap that's keeping this company completely paralysed. So let's look at the money. Let's stop arguing about the headlines for 5 minutes and look at the actual mechanics of what's happening in this country. Because when you pull back the political noise and look at the numbers, you realise we aren't just dealing with a policy failure, we are dealing with a multi-billion pound business model. In 2019, the Home Office awarded 10-year asylum accommodation and support services contracts. They're known as AASC to 3 primary private providers, Serco, Mears Group and Clear Springs Ready Homes. When those 10-year contracts were originally signed, the total cost was estimated at $4.5 billion. Today, official reports from the National Audit Office and the Parliamentary Home Affairs Select Committee show that projected 10-year cost has exploded now to over £15.3 billion. And also, where is that money going? Well, according to government figures, housing someone in long-term private rental dispersal accommodation costs roughly £23 to £27 per night. But emergency block booked hotel accommodation averages £140 to £145 per night per person. In 2024 and 2025 alone, the Home Office was spending over £2 billion a year on hotels, at times running at over £5 million every single day, while specialist logistic firms like Corporate Travel Management were handed separate £550 million contracts just to manage hotel bookings. So now think about how those economics work. If a private contractor gets paid on a volume basis to manage bed spaces, what is their incentive to see processing backlogs cleared in 30 days? There isn't one. A slow, backed up system isn't an operational failure for an outsourcing firm. It's a guaranteed multi-billion pound revenue stream backed by sovereign government debt. Inefficiency pays, and when inefficiency pays, it gets expanded. So then who manages the machine? For decades, we've watched a continuous revolving door between public office and private boardrooms. Senior ministers, former civil servants, and mandarins leave the Home Office or the Ministry of Defence and within years show up as paid advisors or consultants or board members for a major government contractor like Serco or G4S. It's because they know how the procurement, rules. They've got phone numbers and they hold the network. So when these contracts experience massive cost overruns or spark public backlash, nothing actually changes. The advisory committee that is supposed to regulate this, which is called ACOBA, has no legal power to fine or block anybody. The state treats these private providers as kind of, in quotes, too big to fail, because government departments have stripped away their own internal capacity to run social housing or facilities or border logistics like decades ago. So, and while the corporate money spins, the legal machine is completely frozen. Our primary border and asylum rules rely on treaties drafted in the immediate aftermath of World War II, specifically the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights, drafted in 1950 by post-war statesmen like Britain's Sir David Maxwell Fry and Winston Churchill. Those frameworks were designed to stop 20th century totalitarian states from executing political dissidents. They were meant for a world where refugees walked across European land and borders from behind the Iron Curtain. They were never designed for 21st century global transport networks like social media, budget air travel, or international human smuggling cartels. Yet, when Tony Blair's government passed the Human Rights Act in 1998, those 1950s treaties were written directly into British domestic law. So today, whenever a government attempts to enforce fast-track removals, it runs headfirst into a wall of legal challenges using Article 3 on torture or Article 8 on the right to family life, blocking planes on the tarmac through domestic tribunals or injunctions from European Court in Strasbourg. This is where the public get gaslit. When ordinary people look at the local council's budget, where councils spend over $2 billion annually on temporary accommodation for domestic homeless families, or when they look at local GP waiting lists and housing shortages, they raise genuine questions about capacity. But instead of getting honest logistical answers, they're shamed. They are told by a comfortable media class living in London bubbles that asking basic questions about population numbers and border logistics makes them racist. It's a cheap political shield. It's used to police the boundary of debate so the political class doesn't have to explain why social housing wasn't built, why local infrastructure is breaking, and where the billions of pounds in public contracts are going. So where does that leave us? Well, we're caught in a self-reinforcing trap. The corporations bank hundreds of millions in profit and shareholder dividends from the backlog. The politicians use border control for election slogans while outsourcing actual management to private middlemen. The media profits from the outrage while policing the edges of the consensus, and the taxpayer pays 4 to 5 billion a year to fund an entire setup while watching local infrastructure buckle under the weight. This isn't about hatred at all, it's about reality. You cannot run a country where the state spends billions housing people it cannot legally process, while telling its own citizens there's no money left for basic local services. The system isn't going to fix itself out of goodwill. It will only change when the money runs out, or when the public stops being shamed into silence, sees the maths for what it is, and forces a complete break in the loop.